Hello, U.S. history students. Hey, today is Monday, March 23rd. Hopefully, you're up and ready to do some learning. We're going to continue to preview the 1920s here. Definitely chime in once I post this. If you guys have questions, feel free to post some questions on Google Classroom, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, so I'm going to get started here with the presidency and the economy of the 1920s. I have like 15 minutes for this video, so I'm going to try to go fairly quickly, but at the same time where you guys can take notes. Remember, you can always just hit pause, stop, take your notes, think about some questions you may have, and then continue to go on. All right, so we're going to talk about what some people would call the worst president in history, which is Warren Harding. Okay, and also says up here, did you know that I played poker in the White House twice a week? Don't tell anyone, but I gambled away the White House china. Okay, so he was this guy, not with a lot of class, basically brought in all his friends, um, gave them pretty much leverage to do whatever they wanted to do. So you can see here, um, everyone wanted to return to some form of normalcy. War just ended. I mean, think about what we're going through now. We want to get to normalcy as quickly as possible because this gets really old. So anyway, with the war going on, many people have died. Also, the flu virus was killing many people at this time too. People wanted to get things up and going and have normal lives. So as far as isolationism, avoided foreign alliances. So we stayed strictly away from that. We did not want to put ourselves in any more European affairs. Called for disarmament of European nations. So we're asking them, hey, stop making all these tanks, guns, you name it. And then war debts. Europe debts were scaled back to allow their economies to recover. Remember, a lot of countries owed us money, especially Britain and France, because we were creating all these tanks and different things for them for the war effort, especially before we even got ourselves involved in the war. Nativism. So this is something, remember, we talked about before when we were having a discussion about immigration about a month or so ago. So those that were pretty much came in the 1600s, 1700s from like England and France, different places, settled families now have generations that have lived there. They consider themselves to be natives. So they see these new immigrants coming in around 1870, 1890. There's a problem with that. So for one, patriotism. Immigrants weren't loyal to the U.S., as we saw in the war. Religion, new immigrants were Jews and Catholics, people who were very different. People have a problem with people who are different, unfortunately. But the important thing is when people learn to work with them, get to know them, you'll find they're just like you. But anyway, they didn't have that mindset. Urban conditions. Many of them lived in the ethnic slums. Remember, we talked about how most of these immigrants coming around 1890 moved to the cities looking for jobs, didn't have skills. So there's competition for all these jobs working in the factories. And then the Reds. And you guys will be looking at the Red Scare on that task today. Basically, some immigrants were part of radical politics, things like communism. So the answer to this problem, quotas, limits on immigration. We're going to say now only so many can come in. Severely limited immigration from Eastern and Southern Europe and denied immigration from Asia. So we're pretty much putting chopping blocks on that. So as you guys read in that last task, I forgot the number there, but we talked about the scandal that Harding had, which is Teapot Dome. Officials were stealing money, basically. Officials taking bribes from many different people, business people, of course. Harding's interior, such as Secretary Albert B. Fall, basically they let an oil company drill on government land, a lot of times Native American land, in exchange for $300,000 in dollars and in gifts. So that is not something you're supposed to do as someone in the government. So Mr. Harding takes a dive. Okay, so he dies from a heart attack. Some say his wife Flossie poisoned him. Just on some of this information, we can kind of see he probably was not a really great guy to many. Known as the first president to visit Canada and Alaska. So next, Harding's vice president, of course, takes his place. That's the next person in line if something happens to the president. Won re-election 1924. Also, a little fun facts here. Did you know that I had a pet raccoon and a pet donkey? Strange. So Calvin Coolidge pushes this idea of keeping the government out of business. So that whole term of laissez-faire. The chief business of the American people is business. Leave business alone and the nation will thrive. Lowered income taxes, increased protect tariffs, did not help the depressed agriculture industry. As we can see, this is definitely a lot of times tend to be more of the Republican viewpoint. Let business take place. Don't get hands in there. Also, during this time, the foreign policy, which is the term you should be familiar with, you'll probably see this at some point in time if we have a test. The Kellogg-Briand Pact. And this was basically like this shaking of hands with nations and saying, hey, we are not going to go to war anymore. We're going to sit down and have a discussion. We're going to sit down and talk about things. Okay. But the only problem is there's nothing to really enforce these rules. As they tried with um, of course, you don't have the United Nations. At this time, it's still the first one that we had talked about. Forgot the name here for a minute. But anyway, there's no rules to enforce this. The economy of the 1920s. Buy, buy, buy. That means keep on spending your money. The economy was booming. People spent more money than they ever had before. People were making more money than they ever had. Consumer economy depends on large amounts of spending by consumers. So people are buying refrigerators, people are buying cars, things that make life so much easier that they never had before. So definitely everybody wants one. Everybody wants a radio. They want to know what's going on with the next fight, the next game, or what's happening in politics. So prior to 1920s, shopping centers did not exist. No fast food, no McDonald's. What? No billboards. Americans valued thrift. Okay, only buy what you need. We only buy soap if we need soap. And they paid cash for everything. So that was before the 1920s. Now there's a shift, there's a change. So by the 1920s, businesses now think of advertisement. This now becomes a career for some people now. New products, lower costs, higher wages, credit, credit, credit. That means keep on buying, pay it later. So with this higher wages, businesses realized that workers could also be customers, so they paid them high wages. Okay. We want to give them more money so they can keep spending and buying our products. What about big items such as refrigerators, automobiles? Well, they created an idea called the installment plan. Pay a little each month and get charged interest. So whatever that interest is, the company is eventually still making money off of you. Not only are you buying that product, but what may cost $200 will wind up being $350. So they're going to make $150 off of you and a whole bunch of other people more than what the product is probably worth. That's what credit does. This use of credit led to debt in many US households and increased sales for companies. So people are living on in this credit system and this debt. At some point in time, things will fall apart. We'll get to that later. All right, so clever advertisements made this buying acceptable. With all that extra money, companies had to compete for customers, and the answer was ads. Put an advertisement. Look what Sears is doing. Look what this other company is doing. Um, you could definitely get people to rush down to your stores by just having this ad. Look what the women are wearing, or you should buy this. Using many of the same techniques as war propaganda did, Companies marketed products aimed at insecurities and fears. Oh, you don't look good. Hey, got something for that. So they use radio, newspapers, and magazines, mass media. So let's talk about mass media. What changes here? So if you take a look here, between 1920 and 1929, daily newspaper circulation rose from approximately 28 million to 40 million. So I remember when I was a kid, I mean, throwing that newspaper in the yard, that was a job for someone, but also everybody read the newspaper back then. And this was only, you know, I can think of like 30 years ago. Between 1922 and 1929, the number of people attending movies rose from 40 million per week to 80 million per week. And back then, it wasn't like they showed you the previews of the next movie, which again is to get you to go out and watch the next movie and spend your money. But back then, they also would have these advertisements about products before you watch the film. So between 1922 and 1929, the number of households with radios rose from 60,000 to 10 million. Okay, this was how you got your thrills, your entertainment, radio. And if you didn't have one, when there was something going on, big fight, whatever, you went to someone's house who did, and you gathered around, got excited about the next move. The commentator would tell you what's happening every move, and you listened from ear to ear to know what was going on. Henry Ford and the automobile. All right, we all know getting around is very important. Increased demand by making the automobile affordable to most Americans. So we use the idea of assembly line. As you guys know, when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, one person constantly putting the tire on, one person putting the door on, you name it. Okay, so this increased the speed and lowered the cost. So Ford's Michigan plant turned out a Model T car every 24 seconds. Can you imagine that? 1914 Model T was $490. In 1925, it dropped to $390. Ford bought coal, iron, glass, and wood manufacturers to increase the sales. So here we go. Every 24 seconds, here's a new car coming off this line here. Shining it up, getting it ready for the road. Welfare capitalism. Well, companies started looking after their workers to decrease the power of unions. Okay, they didn't want the unions to have the power, the companies want the power. So, okay, we'll raise your wages, supply you some health care, some education there, some training, paid vacations, raise company loyalty and morale of workers. So this was working. Okay, people wanted to come to work, knowing that they had health care, could definitely take a vacation at some point in time, and organize labor lost. So economic danger. So personal debt. Let's talk about that. All these new products and credit put most Americans deep in debt. Workers believed that their wages would continue to rise and then they could pay off debt. In the 1920s, the US had 49 billion in personal debt. In 1929, it was 72 billion. That's pretty high. So let's take a look here. Speculating. So we're not quite at the depression yet. We're getting there. So we had these few years in the early 1920s. Things are going good. Spending that money, getting in debt. All that is all going to come crashing down. So the stock market in the 1920s was skyrocketing. Okay, just like we've noticed a year or two ago. Okay, like in our markets right now, what's happening to our markets? It's going down. Okay, because people are not out and buying. We have other things going on that are causing our markets to go down. So many people would buy high risk stocks with the hope of making it big. This was called speculation. Buying on margin, but stocks were too expensive for the average American. Solution, buying on margin. Okay, this is when someone only puts down a small fraction of the price, 10 to 50%, and borrows the rest. So you're borrowing to make money? Makes no sense. The hope was that the stock would triple and you could pay off the debt and still make a profit. This encouraged many Americans to invest in the stock market. Great for now. Again, the balloon is going to pop.